It's less than a year since additional border controls came into force following Brexit. But Countryfile has been told that the new system just isn't fit for purpose. Joe has been investigating.
It's 5:30 a.m. While most of the UK is asleep, things are already up and running in the port of Harwich in Essex.
Countryfile's been given exclusive access to the port and the checks carried out by the inspection team of the Animal and Plant Health Agency.
They're responsible for checking our animal, food and plant imports. Simon Hudson is a field delivery manager.
So within here we've got 5 rear loading bays, and down here we've got 1 side loading bay. The port will bring them off the boat for us, and then we'll work our inspection.
These checks were introduced last April as part of our new border control system, the Border Target Operating Model, or BTOM for short. Before Brexit, goods coming into the UK from the EU weren't routinely checked at the borders. Goods from outside the EU would usually have been checked by the first EU country they entered on the way to us. Now we've left the EU, it's up to us to check the safety of everything arriving into the UK. And BTOM is the government's answer.
We'll look at exactly what consignments are coming in off that particular ship, and we'll pick the most high-risk ones.
Alice Muttimer is one of the inspectors.
And this will have been picked for inspection for a reason, won't it?
Yeah, so this consignment's got lots of different woody plants, and woody plants are determined a bit more high risk because of the different pests and diseases that come in with.
Right, so everything's about risk. And there's another lorry load that's just arrived as well.
Over 10,000 consignments of plant-related products have passed through Harwich since the checks began. Another inspector on duty is Francesca Moore.
There's a lot of potatoes here. We're quite reliant on imports from the EU for our seed potatoes.
Absolutely, we see loads of seed potatoes.
Diseases can easily develop in the seed potatoes.
So we're going to take 210 samples from the bags. We are looking for the specific healer end of the potato. If there is certain diseases present on the potatoes, that is where we would find them. Give it a bit of a twist and then gently pop out. And we do this 210 times.
You must be doing it in your sleep afterwards. So
I can't eat potatoes afterwards.
It's important work. The team here are on the front line of the UK's biosecurity, trying to stop pests or diseases entering the country. However, 9 months into the operation of the new border checks, there's mounting concern from the farming community about how this system is working. Rob James is from Thanet Earth, one of the largest vegetable producers in the UK, with 114 acres of glasshouses in Kent. Whilst these border checks are designed to stop disease, he feels the new regime is creating an extra risk to their crop.
We rely on imports 100%, whether it's plants that are coming over, as these did, or seeds. Traditionally, a large proportion of plants have been raised in Holland, in very biosecure environments, and been shipped straight to the grower without breaking that biosecurity chain. But with the new model, a proportion of all shipments now have to be inspected at a border control point, which breaks that biosecurity chain. It's a massive concern that we could get a virus infection at a control point because it's not biosecure, and then it can transfer to a crop, which could have a devastating impact on the growers, where they can lose probably up to 70% their yield, if not wipe the whole crop out. The other element of the BTOM is the seeds. They're already tested in Europe. They tested again to get in the UK, and that's putting significant delays of 6 to 7 weeks. It's also causing quite high destruction in what is a very expensive product. Seed is more expensive than gold by weight. If it gets delayed, we could be late planting, we could miss our contracts and supplying the retailers.
The financial impact is being felt across a range of businesses. Nigel Jenny oversees the Fresh Produce Consortium Trade Association and is joined by John Davidson from a family-owned wholesale florist and Mike Parr, who heads up a logistics company.
One of the largest concerns is something called a common user charge. That is a fee that is charged solely to unload the vehicles to allow the inspection to take place, regardless of whether those goods are inspected or not. So for a small business, that is probably £50,000–60,000 annually, which is more than their usual annual profit margin.
Gosh, which just wasn't there a year ago.
Wasn't there a year ago.
Step up in fees.
And that is just the tip of the iceberg, because when you start including the cost of delays, the cost of damage, which does happen from time to time, those costs just ever increase.
Last year it was about 250,000 extra costs on top of things. We absorbed it as much as we could at the beginning, but then it gets to the point where you just can't absorb it anymore.
The government says it's made every effort to keep things affordable for businesses. But Nigel estimates the overall cost to the sector is around £200 million annually, which he suggests will ultimately affect consumers.
There will be less product available, or alternatively, UK consumers will pay far more.
We've become the country that nobody really wants to supply anymore. I'm hearing it more and more. Why do we bother with the UK? Too much cost.
The Netherlands is one of the UK's biggest suppliers of seeds and young plants. I'm speaking to Marina Alijn from the Dutch Transport Association TLN, which has 5,000 members.
The waiting time for an inspection at the UK border is around 4 hours average, but it can easily go up to 10 to 20 hours. So one driver might have 5 trucks held by the inspection for 1 weekend. One truck waiting for 1 hour costs around £65.
Marina says every single inspection her members attended in the second half of last year was delayed, although the UK government says there are no routine delays at the border.
There's also a lot of damage because of the reloading, and there's stories that they have over £30,000 of financial losses. The main issues we face at the moment is the communication. The carriers don't know how long they have to wait, who they're waiting on. So sometimes they just have to wait in like an abandoned train station hall for like 20 hours with only water and a toilet near. There are already transporters stopped driving to the UK.
Back in Harwich, I put these issues to Tracy Wilson, Head of Operational Delivery for the Animal and Plant Health Agency.
There are various complaints that have been made, particularly in the last year, from trade and businesses, particularly around hours and damage and delays.
There have been some little bumps along the way, I would say. We've been given very good funding to deal with the BTOM, and we are still recruiting at the moment, so we're not fully resourced yet, but we have made sure that we have got experienced, trained and qualified staff.
Someone has a responsibility to make that work for businesses, though, don't they? Because
Yes, they do.
from a business point of view, if you're losing money or significant time, it's not going to work.
There's a change in process, and it takes everybody a while to adjust to that.
Yeah.
So obviously, we've had 40 years in the UK to be used to having no border with the EU, and suddenly there's a border.
And is that good enough? I mean, how far have we got to go on this to make this really work?
There are still changes happening. There are still systems to bed in. So there's going to be a process of continual improvement.
From Harwich to an even busier port, Dover. Here, the main concerns are not just delays, damages and the costs for legitimate businesses who follow the new rules, but the potential gaps in the system and how easily they can be exploited by criminals. And this is a real concern for any illicit goods that have avoided checks before they arrive in the UK. The last government decided not to open a border control post at Dover, despite already having a building ready here, and instead moved the checks 22 miles inland to a facility at Sevington. Lucy Manzano is the head of Dover Port Health Authority. With no control post at Dover, they only carry out spot checks on some vehicles arriving here, but aren't happy relying on the checks done at Sevington to ensure food imports like meat and fish are safe to eat and disease-free.
The situation at the moment is some of these lorries will be told to go to Sevington.
Yep.
Do you think they're all turning up there?
No, they're not. There are no controls between Dover and Sevington. It's the same as arriving at an airport and not having your bags checked, being asked to have them checked 22 miles away. If you don't turn up there, you're never going to get a call, and actually you can disappear.
Another part of the problem, she says, is something called Timed Out Decision Contingency Feature, or TODCOF, which allows goods being brought into the country to auto-clear the border without physical checks.
There had been a focus on preventing queues at the border over and above to keep the bad stuff out. Not having systems that were effective to enable us to identify those foodstuffs that might be illegal or banned is, in effect, an illegal meat highway.
When Lucy's team carried out spot checks, this is where she says they've seen evidence of criminals taking advantage of the system and bringing meat that's banned or hasn't had proper control checks into the country illegally.
Pulling vehicles over, it's from those vehicles that we are finding these huge and increasing volumes of illegal meat that is heading for our high streets. Now, if we hadn't stopped that, there is nothing to stop that being offloaded en route to Sevington.
In the first week of this year, Lucy's team seized 10 tonnes of illegal meat, compared to just 400 kilograms in the first week of 2023, which was before the new system of checks were introduced.
Do you think criminals are aware of what a soft touch this place is now, and that they can actually bring their illegal products through here?
Certainly from what we are seeing at the front line, currently we are in a position where our funding is so small that we are only able to provide a 20% operational coverage. What we're doing is the tip of the iceberg.
Illegal meat, potentially carrying disease, is every farmer's nightmare. So just how permeable is the border, with lorries expected to travel 22 miles to Sevington for checks? Let's see.
So here we are right at the port.
Drivers bringing goods into the country legally should get a text or an email telling them to go from here for an inspection, or they can log into a government website to see for themselves if they've been selected for border checks. However, one industry insider, who asked to stay anonymous to protect their job, told us this system was fundamentally flawed, and they'd heard of drivers getting notifications to go to Sevington up to 2 weeks late, when goods were already on supermarket shelves.
So look here, you've got some lorries pulled in on the left here. So if I was up to no good, if I had, I don't know, illegal meat or some other banned product, that's exactly the sort of place you could pull in, offload it, put it into another vehicle, and no one would really be any of the wiser. So there it is, that is Sevington. There are a few trucks there, but really when you look at it, I mean, it's just a handful. When you think what upwards of 8,000, 8,500 trucks come through the border every day, and you're just seeing a few there.
Countryfile submitted a Freedom of Information request asking how many lorries were being sent here from Dover for checks and, more importantly, how many had failed to turn up for those checks. But DEFRA, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, will not release that information. They did tell us, though, that Sevington has all the resources needed to protect the country's biosecurity, with the risk of lorries not attending for checks mitigated by robust data-backed enforcement options. They added, "This government will never waver in its duty to protect the UK's biosecurity, and ministers are working closely with industry, trade partners and enforcement agencies to do so efficiently and effectively." Three weeks ago, however, the UK Parliament's Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee launched an inquiry into the border checks. And speaking to the committee's chair, Liberal Democrat MP Alistair Carmichael.
The fact that Sevington is where it is has got to be of concern, because nobody knows by definition what would be in these lorries, where they are going. When you have an outbreak of something, like for example foot and mouth, because of the way that food travels around the country these days, it can be on fire before you even realise there's a problem.
When we asked DEFRA how many lorries were being told to report to Sevington and weren't turning up, they wouldn't tell us that figure. You're scrutinising them as a department. Will you be able to find out that figure?
That sounds like question number one. And, you know, I only hope that they are trying to avoid scrutiny here rather than the possibility that they just don't know themselves.
What do you hope your committee's inquiry can achieve?
I hope that what we will get is a sensible set of arrangements where our borders are kept safe and secure, where we understand the risk that comes and we don't just ignore it. So far we've been lucky, we've dodged bullets. We can't be lucky forever. The cost of getting this wrong to our economy, to our rural economy in particular, is going to be phenomenal.